Day and night,
Should be live.
praise to you alone. Hallelujah.
Hello?
Glory be to our great God. Hallelujah.
Okay, we'll do.
Glory be to our great God.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, sounds good. Alrighty. Okay, alright.
We were on
Alright, Chip, he said he's in front of Chick-fil-A. He'll be here. Baylor with him. He came out of the chair for Baylor. In the middle.
I get feels that.
And all of that discussion went live.
Oh, really? Hey.
Our cold and ruthless enemy, his pleasure is our harm. Rise up, O Lord, and he will flee before our sovereign God. Hallelujah. Glory be to our great God. Hallelujah. Glory be to our great Let every creature in the sea and every flying bird, let every mountain, every field and valley of the earth, let all the moons and all the stars in all the universe sing praises to the living God who rules
3-4.
Okay, should be good.
Okay, now there's some sound.
Wait a second. Yeah,
All right. Let's see if the
yeah, should be good now. Are you hear
All
me?
right.
3-4. All right, we're on.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry about that. So we had just said the most really profound things, but we probably can't remember them now. So you just have to trust us, Ralph, that was really, really profound what we said. Anyway.
But we
good.
do appreciate your comment very
Yes,
much.
thank you. So good afternoon. We're here today we're going to read Mark 12. We were just saying last night was the graduation of Little Cypress, Mauriceville, and anyway, it went well, although a little bit warm. And and Baylor is here with us today. She is out of school for summer, and so we will hopefully this summer be having some other guests join us to contribute to our conversation about the scriptures. Never too young or too old to spend some time in God's Word and kind of see how some of this stuff lands with Baylor this morning. Give us a very fresh perspective. So, did y'all have anything else before we get started? With
Nah.
Mark 12. All right. Well, this morning we're in Mark chapter 12. So if you are technologically equipped, you can set your browser to go to a place that has Mark chapter 12, or if you're like our Gen Z friend here and are using the paper,
the analog Bible.
the manual Bible there, you can turn to Mark chapter 12. And this first section is a parable, and I'm going to have Brandon read the first section, the parable of the vineyard owner, or the parable of the wicked tenants. So go ahead, Brandon.
Let's go. Then he began to speak to them in parables. A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug out a pit for a wine press, and built a watchtower. Then he leased it to tenant farmers and went away. At harvest time, he sent a slave to the farmers to collect some of the fruit of the vineyard from the farmers. But they took him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent another slave to them, and they hit him on the head and treated him shamefully. Then he sent another, and they killed that one. He also sent many others. They beat some, and they killed some. He still had one to send, a beloved son. Finally, he sent him to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But those tenant farmers said among themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they seized him, killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. Therefore, what will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the farmers and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read the scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This came from the Lord and is wonderful in our eyes.
All right.
Keep going.
Go that next verse.
Because they knew he had said this parable against them, they were looking for a way to arrest him, but they were afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away.
All right. And so here we have Jesus in this parable. Rusty, do you want to talk a little bit about this parable?
I love Jesus' way of slamming on people. He's
Yeah.
like, I've just got a story to tell you. And then as you listen to the story, you're going, this is about me, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it.
It's like, yeah. I mean, because we like stories. We identify with stories.
Yeah. And you have to wonder at what point they recognized this story is about us, right? I love, Jesus does the thing here that God had Samuel do in the Old Testament with David, which is to make them look at the truth of how they were, and he does it through this story. And they do at a certain point, they catch that this is about them. But and so you have kind of these different, in the story, you have these different phases where God, who is the vineyard owner, he sends people to the vineyard to deal with the servants. And are they up there? I don't know.
They're at the restrooms.
Okay. Anyway, so he has them dealing with different points with the vineyard workers. And so in the comparison here, we see that this is like God sent prophets, right? He sent Moses, and he sent, Elijah, and all of these other prophets across history, and each of them were treated badly, right? They did not get the harvest. None of them claimed the harvest that God intended for them to get. So, I think one of the things that we have to kind of look and say is, like, what was the harvest that God was expecting from these tenants? that they didn't get? So what was the harvest that, that the prophets were coming to claim from Israel that they didn't get, right? And so I think there's a couple of ways of kind of seeing this. One is that Israel never really embraced their role as God's people fully, right? That they were always being led away to these foreign gods, to these idols, right? That there was always this stream of idolatry running through the people. There was always this stream of rebellion running through the people. So they themselves were never the harvest. But then there's sort of a second way, and I guess I probably read into this somewhat because I am a Gentile, is that they were never a light to the nations, right? Which was always God's intention, that Israel would be this sort of light on a hill, the city on a hill, to shine out His, the goodness of God to the nations. And they never did that because they could never be who God called them to be. They never shone that light to the nations. And there was also just this, in addition to the stream of idolatry and rebellion, there was a stream of racism in Israel that was, strong. And so they never really seemed to care much about dealing fairly or God in a godly way with the nations. So I think that, as I read this, the harvest that the prophets were never able to claim was that, and then, of course, their treatment. And then Jesus very clearly makes a claim here to be the Son of God. And that is one thing where I'll sometimes hear critics of Christianity say, well, Jesus didn't actually claim to be what the church has made him to be, right? They'll say, well, Jesus didn't say that he was God. It's like, well, no, he did. Right? I mean, to me, this is really clear, right? Brandon, do you have some? What are your thoughts on this, on his claim of divinity here?
It's obvious.
It's obvious. Okay.
Well, and they got it too.
Yeah.
They've been testing him with questions and stuff in these other chapters, but here he kind of turns it around and says, let me share something with you. And they got this. They did. You can see their reaction to it.
And to me, you went down through a lot of detail, and I'm just seeing the main idea of, obviously, he said, all these prophets, you totally didn't get it. Now I've sent you my only son to really try to drive the main
They
point
understood
home.
what he was talking about.
And then you're going to see in this next progression out this chapter, you see the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the scribes, these three different religious leaders. Yeah. Everybody's trying to trip him up, different angles, different questions. And the latter one actually goes, I think I'm getting it. You're right.
Yeah.
And so God is in their presence, and they are missing it.
And I wonder how he told this, what tone of voice he used. It's knowing the religious leaders, I'm honestly kind of shocked they understood he was talking about them.
Yeah.
I wonder how he must have said it to be just hey, this is you.
This is you.
Because
and one of the things
Did
that
he point or eye contact? Or,
yeah.
And then he sent his son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he wink at him?
All right. Something where there's some nonverbal cues going on. And what's sad is that obviously they understand the parable, and so often Jesus says that sometimes he spoke in parables because he didn't want the wrong people to get it. Mm-hmm. He spoke in this sort of coded language, so the insiders got it, outsiders didn't. But here he has put this parable together. They get it, and yet they reject the central message of it, right? And it's they. I guess we do this sometimes too, where it's somebody will come to us with, I really feel sometimes, I know one of the things that we really teach kids to do now is to make these sort of I messages where it's I feel this way when you do that. And instead of we hear somebody what they're feeling, and immediately we get defensive and we say, well, I didn't mean for you to feel that way or whatever. It's the point, first message isn't to say, I'm telling you this to change your behavior. It's, I just want you to know how I'm feeling. And it's these people, they hear what Jesus' message is, and instead of hearing really the heart of the message, they only see the condemnation that's directed towards them in it. And it's like, he's just said, I'm the Son of God, but they miss that because all they can think of is he's criticizing me.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, they really, really miss an opportunity here. So, all right. So, if there's nothing else, let's move on to the next section. And so, the rest of this chapter, Jesus is dealing with these sort of tricks from the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which are called the Herodians in this passage, but it's essentially the same group as the Sadducees. They were the ones who were really connected to the temple, really connected to Jerusalem, and so there are three tricks, and I've heard it expressed that it's a coin trick, a card trick, a coin trick, a cup trick, and a card trick, which are, kind of three elements of sleight of hand that are used. And so, there's a whole lot of coin tricks, and where you take a coin, you're like, all right, follow the coin, and then which hand is it in, kind of thing. Is it this hand or is it this hand? And then, if somebody's really good at sleight of hand, then all of a sudden they're pulling it from behind your ear. Baylor loves it when I pull stuff out from behind her ears. And so that's kind of this first one, is that they're like, all right, which hand is it in? Rusty, would you read this section on paying taxes to Caesar?
Sure. And they sent to him some of the Pharisees and some of the Herodians to trap him. I mean, the goal is clear. Trap him in this talk.
Right.
And they came and said to him, Teacher, we know that you're true and do not care about anyone's opinion. For you are not swayed by appearances, but truly teach the way of God. Flattery. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or should we not? But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, Why put me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. And they brought one, and he said to him, Whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Jesus said to them, Render to Caesar's the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him.
All right. So yeah, you see it. You see the coin trick right there. They're like, do we pay taxes on these coins or not? And it's like, do we pay taxes to Caesar over here, or do we hold this for ourselves? Which hand do you pick, Jesus? And instead of picking a hand, Jesus is like,
And the wise teacher answers with another question.
yeah, answer with a different question, right? He says, let me see the coin, right? And so it's like, all right, whose picture's on this?
They say this like there might have been an option in that day to pay taxes or not.
Yeah,
But if you did pay taxes.
They were not happy with the Romans, but to not pay would have not gone well.
So a very hypothetical question, I think.
right. Well, and I think, part of this is the question I kind of get is, part of it is like they're trying to test Jesus so that if he says, don't pay taxes to Caesar, then they can kind of sick the Romans on him.
Yeah.
But if he does say pay taxes to Caesar, if he chooses this hand, then it's like, he's a pawn of the Romans, right? He's just a lapdog for the Romans. And so it's almost like either way he goes is a problem. But it also, though, it's one of those things where it's like, when you have an issue in the culture where it's like some people are on this side of it and other people are on this side of it, which is like, I've never, I don't know, as long as I've been in ministry anyway, I've never identified myself with one of the major political parties in our country, because to do that is to immediately alienate another group of believers, right? If you say you're a this, then you're alienating that one. If you're this, then you're alienating that. So it's like, I tend to not answer. I don't want to pick either side of those because it automatically alienates the other side. And Jesus, I think, is wise here in that he doesn't answer the question in the way they wanted him to, because he's not going to alienate anybody from the truth that he's presenting. I guess the one thing I do wonder, though, is like they ask him this question, or they say this, you truly teach the way of God, right? And he says that they're hypocrites, but do you think they believed that? Do you think that they saw that he was truly teaching the way of God? That's the one thing that I can't, the text I don't think gives us a clear picture, because expressing that they're hypocrites doesn't mean.
Well, I don't think they believe that. They're just flattering him.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think
I think that's it. I mean,
Okay.
if they believed that, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Yeah. And so, yeah, because, hypocrisy, it holds this meaning of that their words or their thoughts and their actions don't match up.
Yeah.
And so what I don't understand really, I can't really put my finger on it, is are they saying things that they truly don't mean, which would, is a liar is a form of hypocrite rather, that there's hypocrisy in that. So is it that, or is it that they recognize that he's truly teaching the way of God, but they're still not going to submit to his authority, right? It's like, yeah, I know that you're teaching the truth, but that's not enough for me. So I can't. I have a really hard time though from this text really nailing them down to see which way they are, because
Well, but I think we have I guess the clip notes, because it says Jesus knowing their hypocrisy.
yeah,
He was able to know their motives. We can't know people's motives
right.
when we see. It's like, okay, are they really just kissing up to me, or are they really seeking?
yeah,
I mean, he knows.
he knows. And I guess that's my thing. And it doesn't really matter a whole lot whether they're a hypocrite in that they're lying, or they're hypocrites in that they don't have the courage of their convictions to actually stand with Jesus. But either way, they're not doing what they ought to be doing. I just wonder, because
But I think that was Nicodemus. 'Cause
Right.
He was really questioning.
because he's really
But he didn't want
questioning.
to do it in public like
Yes.
these guys. He's like, can we have a private meeting? Because I really,
Yeah.
something's not adding up.
And he didn't ever try to trick Jesus or trap Jesus. And this is very clearly a trap. And so I kind of wonder, did they walk away with a sense of, like they marveled at him. So it's like, yeah, he totally ruined our trick, right? Like this trap didn't work. But did that move them in the direction of faith? Are they now wrestling with who Jesus really is? I don't know. We don't really get a great picture of it either. But so, all right, Brad, would you read this next section about the Sadducees and the resurrection? Oh, well, before you do, let me say this. Oh no, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, but leaves no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. There were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and then died, left no offspring. Then the second took her and died, leaving no offspring, and the third likewise. And the 7 left no offspring. Last of all, the woman also died. In the resurrection, when they rise again, whose wife will she be? For the 7 had her as a wife. And Jesus said to them, Is this not the reason you are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God? For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong.
All right. And so this is the one that's the cup trick, and this is cup trick right here. So there's, I don't know if you can see this, but there's Rusty's AirPods here. And so the cup trick, do you remember this trick? Do you remember this one? I've done it before. So you put it under one cup, and then you move the cup around, you move the cup around, you move the cup around, and you're supposed to slide and slide and slide. And now I say, now where's the, all right, and it's there. And then I'm going to lift it, and is it going to be under there?
No, because you're lifting it.
It's not under there because it's under there, right? That's the cup trick, and hope I didn't ruin anybody's act by giving away the thing. But that's the cup trick, and so that's the thing. They're like, here's a man, and he married a woman, and then she married another man, and it's just, and so she's constantly, and then in the resurrection, which one will she be at? And it's like, oh, we don't believe in the resurrection anyway, right? Yeah, we know, the trick. All right, so. So what is the trap here? What are they trying to get Jesus to do? Like the first one, they were trying to make him, choose either to be a Roman pawn or to be against the Romans. But here it's not around the Romans at all, and it's really not real as clear cut what they're trying to do. What are your thoughts? What are you guys' thoughts on what they're really trying to get Jesus to do here in this question about the resurrection?
Well, I think they're trying to trick him about the resurrection
Okay, yeah.
because they don't believe in the resurrection, but here their illustration is from the resurrection, and they don't believe in it. So I just think that's kind of interesting there, but I just love that phrase, oh, you obviously don't know the scriptures of the power of God.
Yeah.
You know?
To me, that's the answer. I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a theological
And he knew it before they even asked the question.
Right.
or God's ability. I mean,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and so also part of what he's doing is so you've got them and their anti-resurrection. They don't believe in it, even though the Old Testament pretty clearly, I think very clearly, points to the resurrection. Have you ever considered why? And this, I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but why the Sadducees were so anti-resurrection, and it's not something that I think is really black and white in the scriptures, because this isn't. I think when somebody is very obtuse about the scriptures, there's a reason that they're being obtuse about it. Like if somebody's like, here, the scriptures say this, 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 and this, why don't you believe it? There has to be a motive. Like there's a reason why they're going to reject the scriptures. And so the thing about the Sadducees is that they were very connected to the ritual sacrifices offered in the temple. Right? That was their sort of fiefdom, their kingdom was the temple. And they wanted these every week, every month, every season. They wanted this sort of constant stream of income coming through the temple, through people's sacrifice. And the way that they taught was that basically there is no afterlife, there is no resurrection. So if you don't give your sacrifices now, then you won't get the harvest next week. You won't get the harvest in the next season. So it's sort of this idea of an instant karma, that you make God happy today, he blesses you tomorrow. Whereas the resurrection doesn't point that way. When we understand the resurrection, then it's like, you're going to make God happy today, and you still might suffer tomorrow. And you might suffer the next day, and yet you're still going to try to please the Lord the next day and the next day and the next day. And you might try to please the Lord your whole life, and you never see a harvest. You never see the good things that come along with pleasing the Lord, because there is, glorification that comes in the resurrection. And so that explains a lot of why we see good people suffer. And for them, they didn't want that teaching to spread, because they wanted it to be, no, you make sacrifices now. And if you give a sacrifice today and you don't benefit tomorrow, why is it? Well, it's because your sacrifice yesterday wasn't enough. And so you need to give more, and you need to give more. And so it was very much a scheme, I would call it not a scheme, but a scam that they were running on the people. And so they use this idea of the resurrection, and they want Jesus to either endorse their way, and if he endorses their way, then he's going to alienate himself from the Pharisees who are teaching the resurrection, or he truly embraces the resurrection completely in a way that alienates him from the temple authorities, the Sadducees, and then they can just kind of say, all right, then now we're out to get him. So it's kind of this thing where they're asking Jesus to pick his poison, and he doesn't.
Well, I suppose this is an argument that it's a regular thing that they use to defend their position on there not being any resurrection. So there's probably several they could have chosen from that they probably use as a hypothetical situation why it's impossible for there to be resurrection. And this is one of them. How can there be resurrection, with all this confusion that's going on? But
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And this definitely, it has the feel of a philosophical test or a hypothesis test, where it's like you set up a scenario like the ship of Theseus, which I preached about several months ago. It's like you set up this philosophical question and you challenge it with this sort of outlier, and Jesus just is having none of it, because again, just as he did with the section before this, he doesn't go into, like, he doesn't look at the trap. Instead, he sticks to what God's word is and sticks to the teaching of the Lord and says, well, here's the truth. And so, yeah, he's not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. So nice. How many times have you wanted to look at somebody and be like, you are quite wrong? Anyway, so I wonder how loving he was. I imagine he was quite loving and saying it. He's probably like, you're quite wrong. Sorry. Love you, but you're wrong. All right, and then on the last section, all right, Baylor, you want to read some of these verses? All right, why don't you read the top line there, and you'll read verse 28, and then I'll pick up, okay? All right, speak loud.
And one of the scribes came upon the herd, them disputing which one another, and seeing that he answered them well, asked him, which commandment is the most important of all?
All right. Which commandment is the most important of all? Which commandments do you think he's talking about? Are you familiar?
10?
The 10? Yeah, probably talking about the 10. All right. And then Jesus answered, the most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and there is no other beside him. And to love him with all the heart and with all the understanding, with all the strength, and to love one neighbor as oneself is much more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. All right, so this is the card trick. And so, like, it's like he holding up the 10 cards and says, pick a card. And Jesus, instead of picking a card, he says, no, I'm going to do something different. Because in speaking of the commandments, he meant the 10, right? He meant the 10 commandments. And then he doesn't pick one of the 10 commandments. So what y'all probably recognized, what he does instead is he goes to this other passage.
The Shema.
Yeah, the Shema, which is probably the central or focal passage of the entirety of the Old Testament, is that the Lord our God is one, and you shall love him with everything. What are your thoughts? What thoughts come to mind when y'all think about these, the way Jesus answers these two commandments?
My mind goes to family ministry now because of D6.
Yeah. Let's talk about it a little more. What's the sort of the heart of family ministry?
Pretty much just passing on your faith, loving the Lord with everything, talking about it all the time. For those of you that were here Sunday morning for huddle, this is actually what we talked about, was being all in, not the buy-in, not waiting necessarily for your leadership to do it, but looking at Jesus as the leadership, following his example of being all in 100%, loving the Lord your God and loving people, and because of that, making disciples. So
Yeah.
This is a good little section.
And one of the ways that we make disciples, in fact, one of our primary ways is right here, right? It's with our kids. And we make, we want to make Baylor a disciple. Baylor's going to be baptized sometime pretty soon. And, we make her a disciple at church, but also we make her a disciple at home. Mm-hmm. And so, we read the Bible together pretty often.
Also the devotional.
Yeah, when do we do our devotional?
Monday every week.
All right. Baylor's day is Monday every week, and she reads her devotional for the whole family. And
My day was Wednesday.
is your day Wednesday?
I think Friendly's was Monday, Dax's was Tuesday, mine was Wednesday, and Dutch's was Thursday.
Dutch's is Thursday. Okay. And so then, and Friday, Saturday, we just kind of take off, or mom or dad will read one. But anyway, so we do that. And when Jesus makes this reference to the Shema, it goes on, not only is the Lord your God one, but he talks about
Put it on your doorpost, put it on your forehead, put it on.
Yeah. Put it everywhere. put it up in front of your kids and
Talk about it day, night.
day and night. When you get up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, right? It's always supposed to be in front of you. And then this other is, so that's that. And, when Jesus talks about, and this wasn't just Jesus, but whenever Jews would talk about this, the Pharisees or Sadducees, you might make reference to a single verse, but there would be an understanding of that verse is representative of the larger teaching in that section. And he does the same thing with the second, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is this idea of serving your neighbors, of, getting out and taking care of other people. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, those 2 commandments capture all 10 in just the 2. And they really capture the majority of the Old and New Testaments right there together. So,
I've never really spent much thought on this particular scribe asking this question.
yeah, it's a
This little, you are not far from the kingdom of God. I don't know. I've never really spent much time thinking, hey, this one was actually kind of serious.
Yeah. It kind of makes me think that, right, and it feels like the setup for it feels still like a trap. But
when you scroll down to 38, it says, "But beware of the scribes."
yeah,
So, like, the next story down, he's like slamming them, like, "Hey, you're almost there."
but yeah.
It's like, dang, nabbit.
And I'd like this, I think maybe one of the ways that you kind of see a bit of a gear change between the first 2 traps and this one, or the first 2 tricks and this one, is that in every other one, the Sadducees came to him and they asked him a question, which we know is like physically impossible, right? Like, unless they have been really like practicing, and they're like, all right, you take the low harmony, you take the high harmony, and I'll sing the lead, and it's like and with 1 and a 2 and a teacher Moses wrote for us, right? Like unless they like saying it as like, no, they didn't all say it together. One of them said it, but they were representative of this group. But in this story, it's just the one person coming to Jesus and asking the question. And it definitely has a different sort of sense to it, because he's like, he heard them disputing, and seeing that he answered them well, then he asked him which commandment is most important of all. So it's almost like the scribe has just wondered this. Like, he's proven himself worthy, he's proven himself that he's knowledgeable, and so let me ask him this question that's always bothered me. So,
And that's the difference in the mob, too.
Yeah.
You've got the mob mentality. I mean, they're there for whatever reason to push their agenda, good or bad. But, I mean, even today I was talking to someone, it's like, if you have a conflict with someone, you just talk to them. I mean, scribe, generally you wanted answers, I think.
Yeah.
Just talk to people. Because I think when you talk to people,
Yeah.
there's nothing we can't work through. Broken
Right.
marriages, broken families, is like if we just really sit down. 'Cause I think so much of the time we go to the conversation with our perceived issues already, there. But if you really tried to understand, I heard a guy recently say, when you ask somebody their opinion, never share yours. Listen to everybody's truly to understand.
yeah.
And that's hard, because usually when we ask a question, we already have our opinions made up. And so you kind of really
Right.
read with the scribe here. It's like, yeah, he knew the law. And
Yeah. And Jesus gave him such a good answer.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
it's huge.
and I think one of the things sometimes I've heard some people say, but he asked which is the greatest, and Jesus gave him 2, and so he didn't really answer the question, but obviously he satisfied the scribe in the way he answered it, and so, but then, that is the greatest, but then he immediately gives another, and it's like, sometimes we want to boil the scripture down on, and not just like boiling the whole of the Bible down to 2 verses, but we want to say, what does the Bible say about this subject? And we were like, oh, well, it's this. But it's like, yeah, it is that, but it's also, not that it, is contradictory, but that the Bible has answers to situations and issues in life, and the answers are full. They're rich, they're complex, because the situations that we face are often very complicated, and the struggles that we have are sometimes really complex. And in those situations, like, you can't just pull out this one verse and say, "Oh, here's my simple answer." It's like there's more, right? There's a fullness to it.
And Paul later on in his writing says, he sums it up even one. It's evident that you love God if you love people,
Yeah.
which is also just repeating what Jesus said too. You can't say you love God and you don't love your brother. It's like they go hand in hand, but even love can be manipulated too, to say, well, if you love me, you'll,
Right.
it becomes manipulation. But in pure unconditional love that God is, it's really others centered and what's the best for them.
Yeah.
Changes everything.
Yeah. All right. Did y'all have anything else?
Well, I think it's good to see that we tend to think a lot about the people that were against him, but there were some that were righteous, that did try to follow him, that did listen, that did get his approval. It's not everybody's the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So
Yeah.
we talked about Nicodemus a minute ago, and then we're going to talk about the widow here and her faith, but there are also in the story there are people of faith. So
Yeah. So it's yeah. I also wonder, because after this, no one dared to ask him any more questions. It makes me wonder if this scribe was a person of note in the community. Was he like a very noted scholar, and that's why, like, after his question was answered, everybody else was like, okay, if the scribe can't stop him, nobody can. So I don't know. All right, so the last section, let me read that. And as Jesus taught in the temple, he said, "How can the scribe say that the Christ is the son of David? David himself in the Holy Spirit declared, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' David himself calls him Lord, so how is he his son?" And the great throng heard him gladly. All right, so Jesus has answered this series of questions. And then he says, "You know what, though? I got a question. Let me ask this question to you guys and see if you have an answer." And they don't have a clear answer, right? So what is the answer? Do one of you guys want to answer? What is the answer to that question? How does David call his son Lord? Like, it requires someone to say that the son of David, a son of David, would be the Messiah. And I mean, that's the answer. Is it requires them to speak to the Messiah, and Jesus at that point would be like, yeah, right, right here. But they hear it gladly, but they don't really respond as much. Brandon, would you read verses, or did y'all have anything else on that? Whose son is Christ? Okay. Would you read the next section, 38 through 40?
Yep. When he also said in his teaching, "Beware of the scribes who want to go around in long robes and who want greetings in the marketplaces, the front seats in the synagogues, and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and say long prayers just for show. These will receive harsher punishments."
All right. All right. Does that strike a chord with anybody? Okay.
it's a whole lot better to be good than to look good.
Yeah.
I think our society is all about looking good.
Yeah. We could probably, if we were to make a list of the most, like if we said the wealthiest pastor in America, like we could probably come up with a short list and probably narrow it down to, top 10 or so, right? Like we could say, yeah, this group is, probably the wealthiest pastor in America is among these. Or if we were to make a list of the most influential pastors in America, we could probably come up with a short list of most influential or most powerful orator, or, those sorts of things we could probably do. But if we were to try to come up with a list of the holiest or the most righteous, we probably don't know his name. Right? Probably don't know his name because he would not stand out, because that would just not be what his mission on earth is, right? It just, like, there's no reason for me to walk around in the long robes or the preacher sneakers. Like, I don't need whatever, I don't need to single myself out because I haven't come to make much of myself. I'm here to make much of Christ. And so probably wouldn't know him. And it's, I think, certainly the case with these scribes. So, all right. And Rusty, you want to read that last section in the chapter?
Sure. And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put more than all of those who are contributing in the offering box. For they are contributing out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on."
Yeah. So there's a certain symmetry to this chapter in that, at the beginning you have these 3 traps that they try to set for Jesus, and then Jesus tells these 3 teachings, and so they're kind of like, which one does she end up with? And then Jesus said, well, whose son is the Christ? And then they say, well, which one of these commandments is the best? And Jesus says, well, I can tell you which one of the scribes isn't, the best. And then he has this question around a coin, or 2 small copper coins, when he was held up a denarii before. Anyway, it's a very poignant story here. And I think we're all familiar with it. What would you guys have to say about this story, about the widow's mites?
Well, it's in contradiction to what the scribes do.
Yeah.
We want to notice the scribes, and we compare ourselves to maybe the scribes, but we ought to compare ourselves to the widow. I think that's kind of what he's saying. You make comparisons, you make judgments about people, but you need to realize that the one that's the greatest here is the widow, and not the rich people throwing the coins or whatever into the offering. So.
Yeah.
And I think it's really pointing out the fact that Jesus looks at the heart.
Yeah.
It's not about what you wear, where you sit, how much money you put in.
Mm-hmm.
He knows our motives. While we're asking the questions, he knows us, and we put on the pretense of, our social media persona, what everybody sees about us or how they perceive us as we walk in the door. But the reality is we're all his kids, broken, and he still loves us, and he wants our heart,
Yeah.
and he sees it. He's looking.
Yeah. Yeah. I that's the thing I think is really poignant to me in the story, is that he is looking. I saw yesterday somebody was talking about, how in America we say hello or how are you, that kind of thing. And, I heard a comedian say, the worst thing in the world is when you ask somebody, how are you, and they tell you. He's like, how rude is that for somebody to answer, how are you, and say, well, actually, my husband and I got in a huge fight last night. You ask, how are you, and then I heard a man say that in, maybe Nigeria, I can't remember the country, but their greeting, they have this word of greeting, and it means, I see you and you're important to me. And I thought, man, what a great way to be greeted. I see you and you're important to me. And we so often, our culture just takes widows for granted. Like it's so easy in our culture just to not see widows. They don't have a lot of influence. They typically don't have a lot of financial resources, and they are so often just taken for granted. But here Jesus very clearly sees them and sees their value as not an economic one, but that they are beautiful in the eyes of God. It is the singular testimony of Scripture that widows are beautiful in the eyes of God. Every single story about widows expresses this point. And what I find really interesting is that in our popular culture, so often widows are depicted in a negative light. like how many stories exist where the villain is this, single woman, like Hansel and Gretel, where it's a single witch living off in the woods by herself, or how about the crazy old cat lady? Like there's so many negative depictions of older widows in our culture, and they are just vilified so much. And yet my experience matches with what the scriptures say about them. I have had so many pleasant, just wonderful interactions with widows in this church and other churches I've served. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox about widows and how beautiful they are to the Lord now. But even in some of them, there's one or two that if they're watching today, I'd say that I am almost always happy to see them coming. So. All right. What else do you guys have? That ends chapter 12 of Mark, and yeah, we've been here for 45 minutes. That's longer than we've been doing with these the letters or the Acts, but quite a bit.
There's stories in here, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories when we do these gospel chapters, but really good stuff. So,
Well, and thinking about widows, I know our summer cooking ministry, we don't have Wednesday night supper here during the summer because our small groups, when everybody kind of takes a break, but our kitchen team each week still cooks food for our widows, for shut-ins, for those who are in need, and takes meals to them. So I think that's pretty cool ending on this story, and there's no charge for that, but we do accept donations if people want to help with that cost. With those costs for the food during the
and I'll
summer.
say this: you may not be a part of the cooking rotation and the delivery rotation during the year, but if you have some time and you're not involved in other things in the summer, if you'd like to partner with our cooking team and come up here and spend an afternoon cooking or spend an evening delivering meals, you will be so blessed by it. You will so blessed to get to spend some time with some of these people. They're just incredible, and would love to. Not that they aren't happy to see Vandy every week, bringing them, Vandy's, it's a beautiful face that, brings a hot meal to you. But they would love to meet more people, and I'm sure Vandy would love to kind of take you around and introduce you to some of these people. So if that's something you'd be interested in, let us know. We'll
That'd be
hook you up.
And
Yeah.
they could stay a little bit longer on those food deliveries.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and tonight also they're cooking hot dogs. So tonight is free hot dog night.
Yes.
So
And they're
definitely
good
come
hot dogs. They're good. They're the best.
Bar S.
They are not Bar S. Keep that stuff. Get behind me, Satan. No Bar S hot dogs. These are the, oh man, I can't remember the name now. Nathan's.
Good kind.
Nathan's world famous hot dogs. So, all right. What other announcements have we got for today?
Big thing is I think today's the last day of school, so kids, be sure to be here tonight. I think we're having 9 square outside and basketball, and maybe you'd have some gift cards for some winners of those sports. It'll be fun.
That would be good.
Invite a friend, challenge them.
Men's group is meeting tonight. Doug Ween is presenting tonight, so you want to be here for that. Our ladies group is meeting upstairs. You want to be here for that. That's all I can think.
Have we made a decision on the weekend, Saturday?
Oh,
That's a good thing.
We do know that we
Yeah.
did look for Boykin Springs. It is closed, so we can't go up there and do the floodwaters. So we're looking at alternatives at this point.
Yeah.
Nothing to tell you at this point.
So hopefully we'll have something figured out by then. If you have some ideas on places we might go other than Boykin Springs, let us know. You can put that in the comments, and we'll check that out. So,
Surely somebody this time of year has a copy of the book, Oh, the Places We'll Go.
yeah.
So
other
we need a
places.
place to go, so let us know.
Yeah. So maybe in a box or with a fox. I don't know. So,
Eat green eggs
all right.
and ham.
Well, I think that's it for us. So I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and we will see each other again soon.
Bye.